Hey everyone, and welcome back to Hack and Hustle. I'm Anthony Johnson.
And I'm Brad Rager. And this week we'll be talking about how recruiters work. If you're thinking about a new gig or you're in the market or you're just fielding inbound and, deciding whether to answer something, we want to share a bit of detail on the folks that are on the other end of that call. Because if you understand them and their incentives and how they work, that's going to help you understand how to really utilize them and use those relationship to propel your career forward. Well, and this is what I do, right? So I've got a lot of perspectives here. And I think the first time you and I met, Anthony, we were talking about what's good and what's not so good about the world of recruiting and cybersecurity. It's a
Yeah,
space I think there's a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of like messed up kind of behaviors and things like that too. So I'm excited to dig in on this topic with you, man.
yeah, same here. It is really fascinating. But before as we get into it, I gotta make sure I ask this question. For the most part, who do the recruiters work for?
The recruiters work for the companies that
Okay,
pay the bill. They work for the people that write the check, and that is an employer 99.9% of the time.
perfect. Because it's an important thing, I think, for people to recognize, and I think it kind of I don't want to say it makes it okay, but it kind of explains or illuminates why some of the behaviors happen that people kind of see, from the recruiters. Is that fair? Is that a good way
I think
to
that's completely fair, right? Key to understanding how to sell something or how to work with somebody else is understanding the incentives and the context that the other person is in. And I think you're right. I think that people generally uh, they may know that recruiters get paid by companies, but I don't know that they think through the
what that
full
means?
implications of that.
Yeah.
Nor do I think they really understand the world that recruiters tend to live in, which for most of them is a volume and transactional world.
So
And
let's talk about that a little bit, right? Because like a lot of times candidates feel like, well, this recruiter is trying to get me this job, and it's like, no, the recruiter is trying to get the best candidate for the role,
yeah,
right?
yes, that's
So what's the difference between those two statements, though? Like, how does that materialize?
there's let's start with the types of recruiters because it also depends a bit on the type of recruiter that you're working with, right? So at the top of the market are executive recruiters, and they get paid on a retained basis. So they'll charge clients, and these are usually for senior roles, right? Relatively high ticket roles, relatively important leadership roles. And the way they get paid is they'll get some portion, maybe a third of their money up front from a client, and that client says, you're the only recruiter I'm going to use for this role, and we're going to work together to create a
And that's called a
detailed job
retained
spec.
search, right?
That is retained search, and then they get paid when the role is filled. Then there's contingent recruiters, and their job really is to get candidates in front of clients. And for a job requisition that a contingent recruiter has, there might be two, three, five other recruiters that are recruiting for that exact same role for that client. And those people only get paid if the resume that they send over and the person that they talk to is the person that ends up getting hired by the company. That is a volume game. And so those are kind of the two types of recruiters. But then you have to understand how recruiters build their business. And that's where sometimes recruiters will work with candidates and say, hey, you're a great candidate for this role, and I'm going to go market you. And that's in the world of recruiting, that is called an MPC, or a most placeable candidate. And that is a marketing tactic for recruiters. Seldom does that actually happen though? You kind of have to be in an elite tier of whatever job that you're in to have that kind of relationship with a recruiter. 98% of the time, when a recruiter has a conversation with a candidate that's in the market, they are thinking about any job recs that they are currently trying to fill that that person might be a good fit for. Otherwise, they're kind of filing it away in the memory bank and hoping that that person might be a client down the road.
Okay.
And so that is the world that they live in. The memory span tends to be pretty short. So and they also tend to be fairly friendly, right? So
Fairly,
they
what was
may
that?
they tend to be pretty friendly to candidates, right? So they may say, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, I'll keep my eye open for you." I would just say the expectations should be low in terms of whether or not they're actually going to be doing that. So you kind of want to stay in front of it. It's good to maintain relationships, but also know what you're really trying to do is develop some type of connection with as many recruiters as possible that are likely going to be recruiting for the type of job that you are looking for when you're in the market.
That's
and
fair.
and that's with external recruiters, right? Internal recruiters is totally different. Internal recruiters, there's really almost never going to be an ongoing relationship. They've got 15 jobs that they're trying to fill at a given time, and they're looking for somebody who checks the boxes on the
Would
job
be the same.
description that they have in front of
That's fair. Absolutely. That makes a ton of sense.
them. What do you see as misconceptions, AJ? Like what do you think are, things that people are expecting, and maybe even just frustrations that folks have from what you've
Yeah,
heard
and
in your network.
I think there's one thing that's pretty. It's actually pretty surprising is the number of times that say a senior level candidate will get pretty far along, and then the recruiter um, ghosts them, right? And the reason I think it happens is because the customer has ultimately decided, hey, we want to take this person to the next step, but kind of keep that guy warm or keep that girl warm.
Yep.
And instead of going and having an honest conversation with the candidate, right, which would probably then result in them being like, well, they don't want me, I don't want them, kind of
Right.
thing. They just ghost them,
Yep.
right? And then you get people really frustrated with this process, which kind of to your point takes away from the ability of them having a real relationship, right? And so I think that's a bit a bit of a frustration part that candidates do experience. But I think it's important for candidates to know that it's actually not personal. They
Yes.
they really don't want to hurt your feelings. Like, yes, they're probably very very busy. That's also probably true. Um, but if you haven't heard back in like a week or 2 weeks, probably not the top candidate, which is okay.
Yep.
Is that fair?
I think that's totally fair. I think it's totally fair. And it's easy to take it personally when you're on the receiving end of ghosting. And frankly, as a recruiter, it's easy to ghost. Like it's easier to just not say anything than it is to have hard conversations sometimes. I think it requires a long term perspective on the importance and value of relationships to think differently. But I think as a candidate, what you got to understand is 97% of the recruiters that are out there, they are just thinking about the deal that's in front of them. It is a transactional mindset,
A
and
hundred, 100%.
you
I mean,
just
plus
got
it's a
to
volume
understand
game,
it.
right?
It
Like, I'll
is
give you an
a volume
example.
game.
I helped to place a CISO last year, and I collected 56 resumes from CISOs really, really quickly. Sent them over to the client. They were like, "Hey, this is who we want to move forward with." And what kind of drove me nuts was I suddenly had 56 people pinging me every other day of like, hey, what's the status? Hey, what's the status? What's the status? And I'm like, I don't have anything yet. I don't have anything yet. I don't have anything yet. Right. And then the client's like, keep these people kind of warm. We're okay with these other ones going away. And so then I had to like write, you know, 46 messages to people of like, hey, they're going in a different way. They selected some other people. You didn't make the short list, whatever. But it is, and if you're a recruiter and you're working 3 or 4 of these deals, that's a lot.
It is. It is. It is. So, is it great to get ghosted? No, but I think the thing is don't take it personally.
Yeah.
Understand that it happens, understand that it is a numbers game, and you got to play it. You got to think about that numbers game and just apply it in the opposite way, right? Your job as a candidate to is to get in front of as many job opportunities, as many recruiters, as many companies, as many relationships as possible,
So
right? There's nothing monogamous at all about this process,
so
right?
so, so how should candidates or right look to get help from recruiters, right?
I think it depends tremendously on the stage that they're at in their careers, right? So, one thing to really understand about recruiters is if you're relatively in cybersecurity, external recruiters get used for more senior roles and for more difficult and hard to find and challenging
And
roles to
these are, like
fill.
we said earlier, retained search firms.
Those can be retained search, but even contingent, right? Because the thing about security is the scarcity of candidates is tends to be at the top, right? Not so much at the bottom of the experience um, uh, pyramid. Um, So for folks that are earlier in their career, recruiters are going to be of almost no use, like external third party recruiters. You got to understand when you're dealing with company recruiters, kind of how they work and how they operate. But relatively few recruiters are going to have the time and have the job recs for more junior roles. For more senior roles, and particularly kind of the retained search firms, it's good to build a relationship. It's good to you can do things like ask for resume advice, keep in touch, go if they're local, go grab a coffee with them, right? Develop some type of personal rapport in a market like the one that we're in, where there really is more of a scarcity of jobs than there is a scarcity of candidates. You may find that it's hard to get a lot of time with them because their time is going to be spent selling and filling. But that's what I would say. You got to think about where you are in your career. The other thing that recruiters are good for is if you're on a ladder type track and you want to move up and you want to move up and or laterally but to another company, if you want to change what you are doing, if you're thinking about pivoting into another area of security or another type of career or whatever, that is unlikely to be able to happen through a recruiter, because when you're a recruiter, your clients are almost all of them asking them for find me somebody who has done this before for X number of years in a company that's similar to mine, who knows my technology stack, right? Their first screen is somebody who has checks all the
Similar.
boxes of who has done this before. And if you're thinking that you want to get into a space that you haven't really done it before,
But if they just met me, they would know that I could do it, Brad.
but that's not, they got to go then and sell you into their client. And the sale of, hey, he seems or she seems like a really smart person and they seem pretty adaptable, that doesn't fly with most clients. And that's just something you got to realize. And they are not going to be the ones, to the point earlier, they don't work for you, right? Like they're not applying for jobs for you. They're not managing your search. They're not managing your career. The
Yeah,
only person who can do that is
I,
you.
I've often thought about that there should be a different model. It should be like an agent model, like in baseball,
Yeah.
right? Where like the recruiter works for you. Now you got to pay them, but they're going out to get to like they're literally selling you, right? Like,
Yeah.
but I don't know whether candidates would be willing to do that, make the payment. I think some of these comps probably could justify it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. There are actually a few companies out there that operate like that. I have no idea how they're doing, but they will tell you that their job is candidate marketing and interview prep, and they will take you through the process. I haven't heard of any of them totally blowing up. So there is a market for that. I don't know how significant it is in the security space. That type of model is going to work best when the market is scarce with candidates. And
Yeah,
right now, unfortunately, it's not. So I think that the thing you got to understand as a candidate is under go out. There's if you Google cybersecurity recruiters, you will find lists, and there are hundreds of them out there. You know, go out and as part of your portfolio strategy of finding a new jobs, reach out to them, have conversations, get in front of them, let them know that you're in the market, remind them that you're in the market periodically. But uh, but just know that what you're looking for is the luck of the draw that they have a job that matches a person like you at that point in time or shortly thereafter. And so that's why you got to think about it in terms of numbers and be willing to do a lot of outreach. I would say.
that's good. So a couple more questions. I feel like I know I'm just peppering you, but like this is your experience. You do this on so right, like I've been to Canada, but you're the guy on the other side of the curtain here, right? So um, how should a candidate build a relationship with recruiters? Because we know recruiters, if they really want, they're like, man, we really think this guy's going to be able to fill this slot. They're going to wine and dine you, do the thing, right? Like, but what would be your advice? Should candidates be taking particular recruiters out to dinner once? Because I used to go to dinner, once a quarter with these various recruiters. So should candidates be putting that, asking them out on the date, if you will, right? At
I
what
think
stage of your
so.
career do you do
I
it?
think so. I mean, for ones where you have a good rapport, right? And again, this is really advice for more senior folks. It's going to be hard to do that and find recruiters that want to lean that heavily into candidate relationships outside of executive recruiters. But with executive recruiters, I think they really appreciate people who keep up communication, people who they see as maybe potential clients down the road. That certainly helps. But stay in touch, right? And if you develop a good rapport and you have conversations with somebody that goes beyond just the tactics of a job search, go get a beer with them when you're all in San Francisco at RSA or in Vegas at Black Hat, right? Check in,
So
stay
they
in
just remember
touch.
you.
Yeah,
They're the role
make sure
model.
they remember you. Fill them in on how things are going as you find a new job. Do that kind of staying in touch that can help maintain relationships. And I guarantee that the next time they get a rec, if it's for something that fits your type of background, you're going to get that call. You're going to get that call because they're going to say, this is a good person and I'd
So
like to work
so
with them.
so my wife's into this. There's a couple families at our church every year. They send out the Christmas letters. My wife loves these things, right? Because she's like, "Oh, we're getting all that." I'm like, we should write a Christmas. My daughter and I are convinced we should do it because we think it would be really funny. But maybe candidates just send recruiters Christmas letters. Hey, I just moved to New York. We moved to New York this year.
100%. Yes,
Right?
absolutely. Absolutely. And it's okay to assume people are interested in you. Like that's okay. They may or may not be, but people genuinely like folks that stay in touch and people who have a little bit of personality on top of just the dry work stuff. And you should send out Christmas letters, Anthony. I think yours would be hilarious. You should definitely do
Listen,
that.
I would have a hoot with it, right?
But it's so true. We had good family friends who did that every year, and I'd always look forward to those letters. And I think it's the same. I think it's the same thing here. Just be out there, be a genuine human, stay in touch. People like working with folks that are good, genuine
I agree.
people. Respect that folks are busy, and just try and maintain relationships. I think that's good advice beyond just recruiters in general.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's and I think that sounds really really solid, right? Well, I know we're getting close here. The Is there a stage? Is it only the later stage, mid stage? Do you have to be a high potential employee before you start to try to work on building relationships with recruiters, right? Because there are people who are early stage who they're just blasting out resumes and they're figuring out the networking game. Then there are people who are later stage who they've never done this.
Yeah.
Do they just start reaching out and be like, hey, I don't know you, you don't know me,
I
right?
think so. I think so. And I think that it actually has two benefits. One, they may stumble upon some folks that have recs that, they may be a good fit for. Two, it kind of builds that muscle of doing that, right? And if it's not something that's comfortable or natural, we've you and I have spoken before many times on the importance of networking and maintaining relationships. I think it's a good muscle to build, right? And just kind of do it knowing, yeah, your response rate might not be that high, but that's okay, right? It's okay because what you're looking for again is that person who wants somebody just like you, and you don't know that from the outside unless they
That's right.
post their jobs on the website. So reach out, take a bit of risk. What's it gonna You're not gonna get a LinkedIn connection. Oh well, it's not a big deal.
One thing I do think that's kind of funny though, right, is that if somebody hasn't been in sales, like they're not used to getting rejected, and
But they've been in the job market, they are.
yeah, right. But it is a little. It feels a little different, right? Like when you're in sales and you're like, they won't even call me back. Like wait, like you know what I mean? Like, but I do think it's a really important piece of like, hey, get okay with that, right? But one thing I would add, and maybe this will be my takeaway, if you will, right, is ask your friends and network who are some great recruiters that they have worked with that they've
Yeah,
enjoyed, and I think that's who you go. Like, it doesn't need to be cold, but
right.
you're like, hey, Sarah, how'd you come into the job? Oh, hey, who'd you use? I'm not looking, but I'd love to meet them. Could you facilitate that, right? I think that's what
100%.
my takeaway would be.
No, I love that. I love that. And I will tell you, somebody's much more likely to take a call if it's a warm referral or a favor for a friend
Yeah,
and an acquaintance than somebody cold. And I think that's true in sales just as it is in recruiting. But no, I completely agree with you. And I would say, my takeaway is remember who they work for, understand what their incentives are. Don't get bent out of place if you're not getting the responsiveness that you
look at the
need, and
love.
just know the game that they're playing is a numbers game, and you got to play a numbers game too.
Agreed.
Um,
I think that's absolutely great. So I know I kind of jumped ahead on the normal process of the takeaway, but like it was just so pertinent. I had to, man. I had to.
it was a good one. It was a good one. All right. Well, I think that's a good place to leave it. Great conversation, Anthony. Great chatting with you, man.
Always.
And everybody out there, have a wonderful day, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Take care.